Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We take complex source material, boil it down, and give you the insights you need. Today we're digging into an artist who took the mud and toil of rural life and elevated it to something profound, controversial, and, well, unforgettable.
We're talking about Jean-François Millet. He lived from 1814 to 1875, a really key figure in 19th century French art. People often link him to the Barbizon school, which he helped found. But maybe more importantly, he's central to French realism, especially realism looking squarely at rural life.
Yeah, when you picture French art from that time, you might think of, I don't know, grand history scenes or maybe later those impressionist water lilies. But Millet, he zeroed in almost entirely on peasant farmers.
And what's striking is his range. It wasn't just oil paintings, though those are famous. He was a master of pastels, Conte crayon, even etchings. All of it brought this incredible texture and reality to his subjects.
Our sources, biographies, critical analyses, they paint this picture of a life and work that became incredibly politically charged. We're talking hidden paintings, influencing new laws. It's quite a story.
Absolutely. It goes way beyond just art history.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. How did a farmer's son from Normandy end up creating these legendary, often controversial images? Images that concealed meanings and even inspired legal changes.
It's a fantastic example of how art isn't just a mirror to society. Sometimes it actively shapes the rules. And to really get that, we need to start where he started, back in the fields of Normandy.
Right, because Millet's power comes from the fact that this wasn't an outsider looking in. He wasn't some Parisian romanticizing country life.
No, he lived it. He was born in Grouchy, Normandy, first child of Jean-Louis Nicolas and Amy Henriette Adelaide Henri Millet, deeply rooted in that farming community.
And that background is everything, isn't it? The sources emphasize his upbringing.
Totally crucial. His parents were apparently quite devout, and they made sure he got some education. Local priests like Jean Le Verseau tutored him. He learned Latin, read modern authors even, so there was this intellectual curiosity there early on.
Interesting. So a mind leaning towards books, but his body was trained for something else entirely.
Precisely. As the eldest son, the farm work fell heavily on him. He knew it inside out. Our sources actually list the chores, and it's exhausting just reading it. Mowing, haymaking, binding sheaves, threshing, winnowing, spreading manure, plowing, sowing, all of it.
You can just feel the repetition in that list. And that firsthand knowledge, that muscle memory, must be what makes his realism so different. He wasn't just observing.
Exactly. When he painted someone gleaning, bent over like that, he knew exactly how that felt, that constant strain. That experience became the vocabulary for his art.
And how did he actually get started as an artist? It seems like a big leap from the fields.
It was, and it happened somewhat organically through local support. Around 1833, his father saw his talent, apparently, and sent him to Cherbourg to study. First with a portrait painter named Bon de Mouchel, then with Théophile Langlois to Cherville. And Langlois was important. He'd been a pupil of Baron Gros, a big name in history painting.
So Langlois saw potential beyond just local portraits.
Seems so. He was instrumental in getting Millet a stipend, a scholarship, basically. That's what allowed Millet to make the huge jump to Paris in 1837 to study at the École des Beaux-Arts.
The very center of the art world, then.
Right. And he studied under Paul Delaroche. But the transition wasn't smooth. Not at all.
Yeah, the sources mentioned setbacks pretty quickly.
They did. That academic setting, it just didn't seem to click with his earthier sensibility. By 1839, the stipend was cut. Gone. So he had to rely on selling work.
Which is tough for a young artist.
Really tough. And his first big attempt at the Salon, the main art exhibition, was rejected. It was a traditional religious painting. St. Anne instructing the Virgin. The jury didn't go for it.
Interesting that his first rejection was for something traditional, maybe pushed him towards his own voice.
It feels like it might have, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a sign that he needed to paint what he knew. He did have a minor success later, in 1840, with a portrait at the Salon. That let him go back to Cherbourg for a bit, painting portraits.
But the 1840s sound like they were difficult overall, professionally and personally.
Very difficult. Deep personal tragedy hit him hard. He married Pauline Virginie Ono in 1841. But just 3 years later, in 1844, she died. Consumption.
Oh, terrible. That kind of loss so early.
It must have been devastating. And you see him kind of retreat after that. He moved back towards Cherbourg, then ended up in Le Havre in 1845.
He started shifting his style, moving away from formal portraits.
Yeah, he began doing smaller genre pieces, little scenes. And it was around then he met Catherine Lemaire. They eventually settled down together.
She became his lifelong partner, right?
Yes. They had 9 children, They didn't formally marry until much later civilly in 1853, and then a religious ceremony just before he died in 1875. But that stability with Catherine, supporting that large family, that must have been a huge motivator. It probably pushed him to make that big move back to Paris to really try and make it as an artist.
And this time, when he went back, he found the right people, the connections that would change everything. Okay, so the mid-1840s, Millet's back in Paris, his art is evolving, and he starts building this crucial network.
Exactly. This is when he connects with guys like Constant Troyon, Narcisse Diaz, Charles Jacques, Theodore Rousseau. These are the names that become synonymous with the Barbizon school. They weren't really a school in the formal sense, more like a group of artists drawn together.
Drawn to painting outdoors, more realistically, near the village of Barbizon.
Precisely. They supported each other, explored alternatives to the stuffy academic art world, and the influences within that circle were really important too, like Honoré Daumier.
Ah, Daumier. Known for those powerful caricatures and drawings of working-class life, how did he influence Millet?
Hugely. Daumier had this incredible skill in draftsmanship, giving ordinary people this almost sculptural weight, this dignity. Millet saw that, and you can see him adapting it for his peasant subjects. He used Daumier's approach to figure drawing to make a simple laborer look monumental, almost heroic, like something out of classical art. It's all in how he renders the body, the effort.
That's fascinating, taking that urban, satirical edge and applying it to the rural poor.
And beyond the artists, he found Alfred Censier.
The patron and biographer.
More than just a patron. Censier was a government bureaucrat, but he became Millet's rock. Lifelong supporter, advocate, eventually wrote his biography. He was the bridge, really, between Millet, who was often struggling, and the art world establishment in Paris. Provided money, support, belief. Absolutely crucial.
So things are starting to look up. He had some salon success in the late 1840s.
Yes, Oedipus taken down from the tree in 1847, did well. And then a big one in 1848, Winnower. That painting was actually bought by the French government.
Wow, a government purchase. That's huge validation.
It should have been, yes. But 1848 was also the year of this major failure and a mystery. He presented his most ambitious work yet, The Captivity of the Jews in Babylon.
Okay, Captivity of the Jews. What was that like? Sounds different from his usual subjects.
Totally different. It was a huge history painting. Millet trying to prove he could compete with the academic masters on their ground, Big biblical narrative, complex composition.
How did it go down?
It bombed. Utterly. Critics hated it. The public scorned it. A really brutal public rejection. And then the painting just vanished.
Vanished, like lost.
Disappeared completely. For over a century, the assumption was that Millet, probably humiliated, just destroyed it himself.
Wow. So a massive swing from government purchase to total rejection and a missing painting all in the same year.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that this failure seems to have just hardened his resolve, pushed him back even more firmly towards his true subject, the life of the common laborer.
And that led to a shift in his work.
A really decisive one. In 1849, he painted Shepherdess sitting at the edge of the forest. It's not a huge painting, but it's significant. It marks this clear turn away from those slightly idealized pastoral scenes that were still popular, towards something much more real, more personal, more grounded in the actual experience of rural life.
And then came the move?
Yes, June 1849. He packs up his family and moves permanently to the village of Barbizon, southeast of Paris. He's joining Rousseau and the others there. This is when the Barbizon circle really becomes a place.
So he could fully immerse himself in that rural realist approach.
Right. And financially, this was underpinned by that deal he made with Censier in 1850.
Ah, the Censier deal. Tell us about that. Sounds like a classic artist-patron arrangement.
It was incredibly important for giving him breathing room. Censier basically provided materials, canvases, paints, and a regular income, a stipend. In return, Millet gave him drawings and paintings.
Was it exclusive? Did Censier own everything?
No, and that's key. Millet specifically kept the right to sell other works to different collectors. So it wasn't like he was trapped. It just gave him this baseline stability, enough to shield him from utter poverty, and crucially, enough freedom to paint those potentially controversial subjects without constantly worrying about pleasing the salon juries.
That freedom was probably essential for what came next, allowed him to really lean into the work that would define him. And that defining moment really arrives at the 1850 Salon, doesn't it? He shows haymakers, but also the sower.
The sower, yes. Our sources pinpoint this as his first truly major masterpiece, and it's the first of that iconic trio, the sower, the Gleaners, and the Angelus.
What was so groundbreaking about the sower?
It's the scale. The power he gives this single figure. This isn't some picturesque farmer. He's huge, almost elemental, striding across this dark landscape, casting seeds with this incredible energy, almost violence. It's like Millet is saying, this peasant, this laborer, is a force of nature itself.
A powerful statement, but the painting he apparently considered his greatest achievement took longer. Harvesters Resting, Ruth and Boaz, painted over several years, 1850 to 1853.
Yes, he poured himself into that one, considered it his most important work, and the reason is tied to his ambition, his training. He deliberately conceived it to stand alongside the great masters, Michelangelo, Poussin.
How so? By using a biblical story.
Exactly. He takes the story of Ruth and Boaz, this Old Testament narrative, but he populates it with contemporary peasants resting from the harvest heat. He's embedding the modern laborer within that grand, timeless, classical tradition. It's a way of saying their lives, their labor, have epic significance.
So, elevating the everyday worker to the level of historical or biblical figures.
Precisely. And it marks this really important shift. He's moving beyond just symbolic images of peasant life towards commenting on contemporary social realities, but using this historical framework. It's the only painting he ever actually dated, which shows how much it meant to him.
And it worked in terms of recognition.
It did. This was the painting that finally got him serious official recognition. He won a second-class medal at the 1853 Salon for it. A major step up.
Okay, so that success kind of sets the table for the painting that really ignited controversy, the Gleaners.
The Gleaners, 1857 Salon. This painting is, well, it's social commentary wrapped in a deceptively simple scene.
What's the theme? Gleaning.
Gleaning. It depicts this ancient rite dating back centuries, maybe even biblical times, where the poorest people, usually women and children, were allowed to pick up the leftover scraps of grain after the main harvest was done. Millet saw it as this eternal, almost biblical act.
But in 1857, France, painting poverty wasn't seen as timeless or biblical, was it? Especially after the revolutions and social unrest of 1848.
Exactly the point. This is France under Napoleon III's Second Empire. There's still enormous anxiety about the working classes, about socialism, about potential uprisings. So when the Paris elite saw Millet's painting, they didn't just see poor women working.
What did they see?
They saw these huge looming figures of the rural poor, shadowed, monumental. They looked threatening. To the establishment, they looked like a symbol of the potentially rebellious masses, less like humble workers, more like an omen.
So the reaction wasn't about the art itself, but the fear it provoked.
Absolutely. The figures were seen as too large, too strong, too present. One critic famously called them Millet's three fates of pauperism, like they were harbingers of social doom, maybe even revolution. The sources are clear. The public reaction was largely hostile. It shows just how politically charged the mere depiction of poverty had become.
Let's talk about the technique. How does he make them seem so powerful, almost menacing?
His composition is brilliant, and deliberately so, I think. You have these lines that follow the curve of each woman's back, leading your eye down to the ground, then up again. It visually reinforces the repetitive, back-breaking nature of their labor. It's an endless cycle captured in the paint.
And the contrast between foreground and background.
Stark. Utterly stark.
Yeah.
The three gleaners in the foreground are large, imposing, dressed in dark, coarse clothing. They're mostly in shadow, bent low, struggling for tiny bits. But way off in the sunny distance, you see the landowner's farm overflowing with abundance. Huge stacks of harvested grain, carts piled high, even a figure on horseback overseeing it all.
So it's not just showing poverty, it's showing the gap.
Precisely. It juxtaposes the immense effort and meager rewards of the poor with the seemingly effortless wealth accumulated by the property owner in the background. He gives the women a kind of noble strength through their scale and solidity, but simultaneously highlights just how marginalized and desperate their situation is. It's incredibly powerful social commentary.
Wow. Okay, let's move to the third painting in that iconic trio, the one with the really strange backstory and incredible legacy. The Angelus.
Ah, The Angelus, painted between 1857 and 1859. This one has perhaps the most surprising legacy of all, especially legally. It started simply enough as a commission.
Commissioned by an American.
Yes, Thomas Gold Appleton, an American art collector. He actually knew one of the other Barbizon painters, Constant Troyan. But the painting Appleton commissioned wasn't initially called The Angelus.
No. What was it called?
Its first title was Prayer for the Potato Crop. Just a simple scene. Two peasants in a field, pausing their work digging potatoes, heads bowed in prayer at dusk.
So what happened? Why the change?
Well, Appleton, for whatever reason, never actually took possession of the painting. He didn't follow through on the purchase in 1859. So Millet had this finished painting he needed to sell.
Okay.
So he made a couple of tweaks. He painted in a tiny church steeple on the horizon, making the context more specifically religious. And he changed the title to The Angelus, referring to the Catholic prayer traditionally said at morning, noon, and evening, signaled by the church bell. It made the scene more universally understandable, perhaps more marketable.
Did it sell quickly then, become instantly famous?
Not exactly. Even with the changes, when it was shown around 1865, its value was okay, but not spectacular. Millet's reputation, especially after the Gleaners, still made some people nervous.
His perceived political leanings.
Right. Even a seemingly pious scene, when focused on the rural poor, made some collectors wonder if there was a hidden socialist message. His sympathies were still considered suspect by some parts of the establishment.
But that caution completely evaporated after his death in 1875.
Oh, absolutely. The story of what happened to the Angelus after Millet died is incredible. It became this huge symbol, a national treasure almost.
A bidding war.
A mad bidding war erupted. It became this point of national pride for France. There was a French syndicate trying to buy it to keep it in the country, competing fiercely against American collectors who also wanted it badly. The price just kept climbing and climbing.
How high did it end up going?
The final price was staggering for the time. Yeah. 800,000 gold francs.
800,000, that's astronomical, especially for an artist who'd struggled financially for so long.
Exactly. And that huge gap, the immense price the painting fetched versus the relative poverty Millet himself lived in, and the situation of his surviving family, his widow Catherine and their 9 children, that disparity became a major public issue.
And this is what led to the legal change.
This is the direct catalyst for the invention of the droit de suite,
Which is...
we often call it the artist's resale right. Before this, an artist sold a painting once. If they were struggling, maybe they sold it cheap. If 50 years later that painting was worth millions, the artist or their family saw absolutely nothing from that massive increase in value.
So the droit de suite aimed to fix that unfairness.
Yes. The Angelus situation highlighted the moral problems so starkly. The droit de suite established a legal right for artists or their heirs to receive a small percentage of the sale price each time their work is resold professionally, like through an auction house or gallery. It was specifically intended to provide ongoing compensation and prevent future situations like the Millet families, where the creator's legacy generates vast wealth, but the creator's family struggles.
Wow. So Millet's painting didn't just depict the struggles of the poor. Its afterlife literally created a mechanism to offer some financial protection to future artists. That's a legacy. So moving into the 1860s, despite some of those lingering controversies, Millet's reputation finally solidifies. He starts achieving real success.
Yes. The 1860s brought more stability. He got a contract for 25 works, which provided a regular monthly income. That kind of steady support is huge for an artist. And he found another major patron, Émile Gogh.
Gogh commissioned pastels, right. A lot of them.
A huge number, eventually around 90 pastels. This focus on pastels in this period is important too. It shows his incredible technical skill wasn't just limited to oil paint. He was exploring different media intensely.
And the official recognition kept coming.
It did. The Exposition Universelle in Paris in 1867 was a major moment. They featured several of his key works, including both the Gleaners and The Angelus. Then, in 1868, he was named a Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur, France's highest order of merit. He definitely arrived, no longer just the struggling guy in Barbizon.
But just as things seem settled, history throws another curveball. The Franco-Prussian War in 1870.
Right. War breaks out, Paris becomes unstable, dangerous. Millet had to flee with his family.
Back to Normandy.
Yes, back to his roots. They went to Cherbourg and Gleaners for safety. It was disruptive, obviously, physically and financially difficult. He did return to Barbizon late in 1871, and in his last few years he actually achieved significant financial success. He was even elected to the Salon jury. But his health was declining rapidly.
And he passed away in 1875.
January 20th, 1875. He actually had several large government commissions he wasn't able to complete because his health failed him.
But that period of disruption during the war, it actually holds the key to solving that old mystery, doesn't it? The missing painting.
Exactly. The captivity of the Jews in Babylon. The one that vanished back in 1848 after being rejected.
What happened? How was it found?
It wasn't found exactly. It was uncovered. In 1984, so over 100 years after his death, scientists at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston were examining another Millet painting from 1870 called The Young Shepherdess. They used X-ray analysis.
And under the surface?
Under the paint of the peaceful shepherdess scene, the X-rays revealed the clear structure, the composition of the captivity of the Jews in Babylon. The whole ambitious, complex scene was right there, painted over.
No way. So he didn't destroy it after all.
It seems not. The most likely explanation is that during the Franco-Prussian War, when he fled Paris, and materials like canvas were probably really hard to come by and expensive, he simply took this large, failed painting and reused the canvas, painted right over his biggest public failure.
That's incredible. Talk about layers of history on one canvas. His ambition, his failure, and then his practical need during wartime, all preserved.
The canvas itself tells such a story, but it's not the only secret hidden in his work. We have to talk about the Angelus again, and that darker theory.
Ah, yes, the Salvador Dalí connection.
Dalí. The surrealist master was completely obsessed with the Angelus. He wrote a whole book about it, a psychoanalytic study called The Tragic Myth of the Angelus of Millet. And Dalí being Dalí, he wasn't buying the simple story of pious peasants.
What did he think was going on?
He saw all sorts of hidden meanings, repressed sexual aggression, psychological tension, but his most radical claim was about what they were praying over. He didn't think it was potatoes.
Was them?
Dalí insisted, absolutely insisted, they were praying over the grave of a buried child.
Whoa. That completely changes the mood. From piety to profound grief. Where did he get that idea?
From his interpretation of the figure's poses, the somber atmosphere, the composition, he felt it radiated loss, not just devotion. His conviction was so strong, so persistent, that eventually, years later, it prompted the Louvre Museum, where the painting hangs, to X-ray it during a conservation process.
And the X-ray showed.
The X-ray revealed something astonishing. Right there, beneath the paint layer of the basket of potatoes sitting on the ground between the two figures, was a painted-over shape, a small, dark, geometric form.
And it looked like...
It looked remarkably like a small coffin.
Seriously, a coffin shape, painted over.
Yes. Now, art historians are cautious. We don't know for sure what Millet intended. Was it an earlier idea he abandoned? Did he paint a funeral scene initially and then change it to something less grim, maybe to make it more sellable after Appleton backed out? Or was Dalí right? Was the grief the hidden subject all along? We can't be certain.
But the presence of that shape, deliberately covered up, it's chilling. It adds this layer of potential tragedy, of deep, private sorrow beneath the public image of devotion.
It makes the painting even more complex, doesn't it? Especially given its history becoming this valuable cultural icon. It carries this possible secret grief, much like Millet's own life, perhaps.
Beyond these incredible hidden stories, Millet's influence on the artists who came after him was immense, especially the post-impressionists. Van Gogh is the obvious one.
Oh, foundational. Van Gogh practically worships Millet. The sources call Millet a major source of inspiration, especially early in Van Gogh's career. Vincent mentions Millet constantly in his letters to his brother Theo.
What did he admire so much?
He admired Millet's honesty, his commitment to depicting the poor with dignity, the raw energy in his figures. Van Gogh copied Millet's works, obsessively, drawings, paintings after the sower, after scenes of peasant life. He wrote about trying to capture that same feeling, that same force. You can see Millet's DNA all over Van Gogh's depictions of peasants and rural labor.
And the influence went beyond Van Gogh.
Definitely. Millet's later landscapes, especially the ones he painted near the Normandy coast during the war, they became important for Claude Monet.
Monet. How so?
Monet studied how Millet handled the light, the atmosphere, the composition in those coastal scenes. You can see echoes of Millet in Monet's own early Impressionist paintings of the Normandy coastline. Millet provided a kind of structural reference point.
And even Georges Seurat, the pointillist, that seems like an odd connection.
It seems odd at first, but it makes sense if you look at Millet's figures. Remember how we talked about their monumental, almost sculptural quality?
Yeah, that weightiness.
Seurat picked up on that. He admired how Millet simplified forms, gave them this enduring, almost geometric structure. That emphasis on underlying form, abstracting it to convey something solid and symbolic, resonated with Seurat's own search for order and structure in his very different pointillist technique.
So Millet's impact wasn't just emotional, it was formal too. And it spilled out of painting into literature and even popular culture.
Massively. His painting, L'Homme à la Hoe, the man with the hoe, showing this utterly exhausted laborer leaning on his tool, it directly inspired a really famous poem by Edwin Markham in 1898.
The Man with the Hoe.
That's the one. Markham used Millet's image as this powerful symbol of exploited labor across the world. It became an anthem for social justice. And the inspiration continues. There's a 2005 poetry collection by David Middleton inspired by Millet's work too.
And then there's the Mark Twain play?
Right. Is He Dead? From 1898. Mark Twain uses a fictionalized Millet as the main character. It's a comedy, a satire. about a struggling artist who fakes his own death because he realizes his paintings will be worth much more if people think he's dead. So he pretends to die to achieve fame and fortune.
That's hilarious and deeply ironic given what actually happened with the Angelus after Millet's real deaths.
Exactly. Twain poking fun at the absurdities of the art market, an absurdity that Millet's own posthumous fame helped to highlight. It's kind of perfect that the artist whose legacy prompted laws to protect artists also became the centerpiece of a comedy about exploiting that very system. Hashtag outro. So when you pull back and look at Jean-François Millet, you see this incredible paradox. Here's a man from the humblest beginnings, a farmer's son, and he takes the most ordinary, roughest subjects, peasants digging, sowing, resting, praying, and he gives them this monumental dignity, this almost classical power that art usually reserved for gods or kings.
He didn't just paint realism, he made it confrontational. He turned depictions of rural poverty into social dynamite, forcing Parisian society to look at the human reality behind their comfortable lives. The reaction to the Gleaners shows just how provocative that was.
And his legacy is just so far-reaching. It's in the law books with the Droit de Suite. It's in the canvases of Van Gogh, Monet, Seurat. His importance is still recognized today. Think of that recent big exhibition, Millet, Life on the Land, marking 150 years since his death. He remains relevant.
Okay, so here's something to leave you with, our final thought. Consider that Dalí theory about the Angelus. If he was right, or even partly right, that beneath that surface of calm piety lies this hidden grief, this painted-over coffin. What does that make you wonder about other masterpieces? How many seemingly simple, beautiful paintings by the great artist might be concealing their own secrets, their own layers of sorrow or struggle just beneath the brushstrokes we think we understand so well? What else is hiding in plain sight?